if, Wallis Simpson were to read Another Woman's Husband right now, what she'd think about the whole idea of historical novel and weaving her story into Diana's story. And you did it masterfully, but do you ever wonder what your subjects would think?
Oh, I'm sure she would sue me if she could photographs.
To the Harbour Grace excursion with the voice to have.
Books really saved my life.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
It's so good to be with you tonight. It's wonderful to be here. I want to share something with you that I shared with Gill backstage, and I said I really haven't delved into the realm of historical novels before. This, I think, is my first.
Really?
And worth it. And I had so many questions as to how this would work and melding in and out of different time periods, but it works so very well.
Oh, thank you.
So that's the first part. The second part is I shared with Gill that I was doing Canada AM. I had literally, well, it wasn't even AM yet, it was CTV National News in 1997. I was a reporter in Halifax, and I started in July of 1997. So the story of Diana and her death broke a month later. And so to delve into this book, it brought me right back to that time. But then to combine Wallis Simpson's story with Diana's story, it works so brilliantly, but I want to know how it came to be in your mind, that you would bring these two women together.
Hello, by the way, and thank you so much for coming out tonight. I'd wanted to write about Wallis for a long time, and I was just looking for the right angle to try and explore her character and understand her. And then I came across this fact that hours before she died, Princess Diana visited Wallis's house in Paris, and nobody's entirely sure why she went there. Muhammad al-Fayed says that they went there to have a look around the house, that they might have been considering living there, but none of Diana's friends believe that because it's very exposed. It's just sitting in the middle of the Bois de Boulogne, and anybody could come past and look in. And apart from that, they didn't stay very long. They stayed 28 minutes in the house, and Diana stayed in an office downstairs. She didn't look around the house at all, so that explanation didn't work. And I began to think then about the connection, the similarities between the two women, and I wove a story that tried to shed a bit of light, give my answer as to why she might have been there, and to look at the two women as well.
So there are two narratives happening here.
Yes.
There is Wallis Simpson and her best friend Mary, so that's one narrative.
Yeah.
And then you've got a newly engaged couple. That's another narrative. And so it starts with that couple newly engaged, and all of a sudden there's all of this traffic in this tunnel. And of course, it's the tunnel where the crash has happened. And so the story unfolds. Tell us about the research that goes into the timing of how that happened, the nuance of what was going on, the paparazzi and everything else on the Diana side, and then we'll get to Wallace and Mary.
Okay. I don't know how many of you here remember what you were doing when Wallis died, but Diana died, but it was just so massive, that story, and so shocking, and so hard to come to terms with, actually. I was just saying I was on my way home from a party at night, and the news came in that she'd been in an accident and her leg was broken, and I thought, poor thing. And we woke up the next morning and she was dead, and it was horrifically shocking. And I wanted to capture that era, the kind of the general, the mass grieving around the funeral. But also, I don't know what it was like over here, but in Britain, when people were polled, 85% of the British public thought there was something suspicious about that crash.
Same thing here.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So just to try and but I'm just writing about it from 30th of August 1997 to December 1997, so I'm writing about what people thought at the time, not what was found out in the subsequent inquest or so forth. So it's a very tight time frame in that story.
And then to juxtapose that with the story of Wallis Simpson, half a world away, and her friend Mary, their friendship, and how this then leads to the crown.
Yeah. The reason for using Mary to look at Wallace through Mary's eyes was to try and maybe get a bit more sympathetic view of Wallace than has come across in biographies of her over the years. A lot of them written by men, and a lot of them focusing on the affairs and the secret sexual techniques she's supposed to have learned in Chinese brothels. And I thought if I look at her through the eyes of her childhood girlfriend, who she met in 1911 in summer camp, and stayed friends with right through to the abdication crisis in 1936. I thought maybe I'll get a more sympathetic view of her, her vulnerabilities from growing up quite poor because her father died when she was a baby, and just what made her the way she was.
Kind of your attempt to set the record straight, maybe?
I don't cover the whole of her life.
No.
And as we were saying earlier, she did some very questionable things during the war, but I stopped before that, after the abdication crisis, so I don't go into her later life.
But it does put her in a more nuanced light.
I hope so.
Yeah, it sure does.
That was one of my goals in this.
Another is the similarities between these two, between Diana and Wallis Simpson. Tell us about that.
Well, the first one is they married into the same family because the Duke of Windsor was great uncle to Prince Charles, so quite closely related. But they both grew up in single-parent households because Wallis's father died when she was young, and Diana's parents got divorced and her mother lost custody. So they had a kind of insecurity about that. They both had failed first marriages, and they struggled to find love afterwards. They were both fashion icons of their day. I think they both had eating disorders. Diana admitted hers, Wallace never did, but she did say that all my friends know I would much rather shop than eat. She was just stick-thin, Wallace. And they were both hounded by the media, really got bad press and a difficult time. Wallace had bricks through her window and horrific headlines around about the abdication crisis and later. So yeah, they had quite a lot in common. So that's why it felt like, and also because Diana had been to her house, I thought, no, there is a good reason to try and pull the two stories together and compare the different experiences they had.
But the character, Diana, as a person, doesn't appear in this book. Why that decision?
It's too recent. It's just a decision I made that it's too recent to invent Diana as a character and give her dialogue when her sons are still alive, and I really didn't want to offend anybody with this portrayal of Diana. And so I decided to write more about the phenomenon around her death and have people remembering her, of course, but she's not a character in this book anyway. Maybe a later one in another decade or so.
I'm thinking about this book. I'm thinking of the affair, which, interestingly enough, weaves in what was happening on the set of Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, and all of that going back and forth. What is it about love that you love so much? Because that's a common thread.
I suppose so.
Yeah.
It's a common thread in lots of novels, though. It's the way people find love in their lives and the huge difficulties of making it work. Even just, a normal relationship, if you meet someone at college and marry them, it's still difficult. It's still really hard. But particularly with royal families, with actors, there's a whole extra load of complications thrown in the way of love working. So that's interesting. That makes it more interesting as fiction when it's complicated and difficult and lots of hurdles.
So interesting, too, because one of the characters is a journalist. And so to see things through his eyes, as he's covering the story of Diana and wants to push forward and gets into, there's a sensational kind of aspect to this. And his fiance thinks, this is ridiculous, leave the poor woman alone. But to have that aspect, there's so many different angles here, because I related to that, and I think a lot of others could relate to that too. To have that character was important.
He's looking at it very much as a professional producer.
It's a story.
It's a story for him, and less on the sort of emotional side. So I'm glad that worked for you.
It did.
As a producer.
It did, although I felt that I was more inclined to delve into the empathetic, you know what, leave her alone, why are we doing this? But that was always and has been my struggle as a journalist, that I want to tell the story, but I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings doing it.
Yeah.
You know?
No, absolutely.
Want to talk more about the Wallis Simpson side of this and the whole idea of friendship. Because the friendship with Wallace and Mary goes very, very deep. And as I read this book, I thought, is there somebody that you're writing about? And you know, maybe somebody that was close to, because it felt like that. There were conversations that these women had, the stuff that they shared, and I thought, oh my gosh, is this just historical stuff? Or does Gill, is she writing about a girlfriend here or a sister here? It just felt that way to me.
It's not any one person.
Is it a combination?
Bits of
yeah, it felt
lots
personal.
of different girlfriend situations. Yes, you know, it's a complicated relationship, a long-term female friendship, and it goes through lots of different periods, I suppose. When maybe one of you has a baby, and then you're not around so much, or whatever is going on in your life, or you might live in different countries for a while. But I like the way, you know, long-term friendships mutate and change, and they still have this rock-solid core.
There's a special glue.
Yeah.
There's a special glue. Even though maybe, you know, you're apart, you don't speak every day, there's that glue that bonds you together, which permeates through this book, very, very much so. We are in a time now where royalty is front and center. We just had a royal wedding not too long ago. And I think, if I might use the term, you know, royalty is back in style. And I say this because when you look at the fashion pages, there was a pair of earrings that Meghan Markle wore the other day, for example, during TIFF, and they sold out.
Yeah.
Burke's, which is a company here in Canada that sells them, they sold out. I mean, whatever she's wearing, whatever Harry's doing, and they seem to be the younger set, the new style kind of royals. When you look at who Wallis was she before her time? Because I look at who she was through your writing and through what I know about her, and she pushed boundaries in ways that we see the younger royals doing now, but she did it so long ago.
I guess she did. I mean, she pushed some boundaries in getting divorced, because divorce was a huge scandal in the you know, well, her first divorce was, 1921? That's massive. And she did, but she didn't. There were women in that era who were going out to work, and she briefly considered it, and then she thought, no, I'll just steal Ernest Simpson from his wife instead. So yeah, she pushed some boundaries, but not others, and not in the workplace, certainly.
I wonder if, and I don't know if this could happen, but I wonder if, you know, Wallis Simpson were to read Another Woman's Husband right now, what she'd think about the whole idea of historical novel and weaving her story into Diana's story. And you did it masterfully, but do you ever wonder what your subjects would think?
Oh, I'm sure she would sue me if she could find grounds. Yeah, I suppose I do, yes. I hadn't really thought about it that way. I thought more about Mary Kirk still has a son who's alive who lives in Israel. And so I was very concerned about what he might think about it. I haven't heard any word that he's seen it. Is that working? Yeah.
It is now, yes.
And but Mary's family, I managed to find a self-published biography of Mary by her sister, Anne. And it's a strange little book. It consists of letters that Mary wrote to Anne while she was living in London, and Anne's imagining what she might have replied to them, and then they stuck in some photos and they photocopied it. And there was a fantastic librarian at Yale who managed to help me track down a copy. And what's really lovely about it is I got to hear what Mary's voice was like, the phrases she used. And she was so joyous. She was just a really happy, fun, social person, intensely loyal to Wallace, and always ready, no matter how she was treated by her, she was always ready to.
And she wasn't treated well sometimes.
No, I know.
She was pushed to the side a lot.
She was.
But everything that you just said there, Gill, the research and Yale and everything else really gives a really special bird's eye view of the kind of research, the extensive research that goes into writing something like this.
Fiction.
Does it get tiring? Are there times where you think, okay, enough, but you've got to stay true to the craft, right?
Actually, research is much easier than writing.
Really?
I was saying to somebody yesterday, when I was 8 years old, if you'd asked me what job I wanted, I would say, would anybody pay me to just sit and read books all day? And kind of, so the research bit of the novel, I just sit and read lots of books. And I'll certainly, if I'm writing about somebody like Wallace, I'll try and go back to primary sources, so their letters and diaries. And in Wallace's case, she has written an autobiography called The Heart Has Its Reasons, but I wouldn't rely on that for the facts particularly. She reinvented quite a lot in 1956, she published it.
Is it true that you were thinking about medicine at one point?
I studied medicine for 2 years, yes. And that's just, my father was a medical researcher, and I was really, it's not fashionable to say this at all, but I was really swotty at school, so I just got straight A's. So everybody kind of assumed that I would do medicine because of my dad, so I went, okay, I'll do medicine. And I was fine for the first 2 years where you just study and you pass exams. I could do that. Well, I could do that then. I couldn't pass an exam to save my life now. I've got no memory anymore. But after 2 years, they started trying to make us go into hospitals and treat sick people. And I was like, oh no, I don't like this bit. It's a bit pathetic, really. You'd think I'd have thought of that before somehow.
No, but we're so happy, though, that you're doing what makes your heart sing.
It does.
What is it about writing these books, particularly, and you write books as well that aren't historical novels, but there's so many that are, but what is it about this genre that makes your heart sing, that gives you the passion that we see in these pages, because the passion jumps out of these pages?
I love history, and I got that from my mum. We always used to watch historical dramas together on the telly and read biographies and so forth. But what I really like about writing the novel is trying to put myself into somebody's shoes
Is that
and
what you do?
imagine what it would have been like to live in that era with the different kinds of choices that they had. Sometimes religion was a much stronger force when you're writing a historical novel. You can't ever forget how important that was. Or just different things, what kind of food they ate, what kind of aspirin they took for a headache. It's fascinating to try and get all the little details correct.
Yes.
And I love it when I come up with a new fact that you find somewhere in the footnotes. It's quite different from researching for non-fiction, because it doesn't matter particularly what government was in power or what political acts were being passed. I want the details of what they had for dinner and you know, what music they were listening to.
And speaking of details, location plays a very, very interesting role, because it's so, well, I felt that I was in the tunnel. The armored tunnel, at the beginning, I thought, wow.
Yeah.
It felt almost claustrophobic, and the concrete, and just all of it. Tell us about location and what that meant to you and how it plays into, it's almost another character.
Oh gosh, that's interesting.
It almost
you would
is.
say that.
It almost is, yeah.
Yeah. I haven't been to the Alma Tunnel. One of the great things about
You haven't
a
been to the
novelist
Armored Tunnel? And you wrote it like that?
Sorry. Nowadays, you can just go on Google Street View. Is that cheating?
I love that you said that so much.
But it is, it's horrible. It's fluorescent strip light and great big concrete blocks and really grimy, you know, all the soot from the traffic. Yeah, no, maybe I shouldn't have admitted that.
I love that you did, though. I love that you did. I thought, my gosh, her research, she was there. This is why she wrote it this way.
There's several other locations. Brighton is quite a big location
in
the book, and I do go to Brighton a lot. It's just on the south coast, south of London. It's gorgeous. It's this old world. It became popular in the Edwardian era as a place that men took their mistresses for a weekend away, that kind of thing. And it's got beautiful architecture and buildings that you feel like a ghost in Edwardian costume could step out any moment. And then on the other side, there's an amusement arcade. So it's a mixture of these things. And the pebbly beach, and it's got two piers, one of which is burned out, and it's this strange cindery charcoal ghost of a pier. It's a strange place. It's lovely, though.
If there is an overarching theme in another woman's husband, for me, it might be the more things change, the more they stay the same in certain aspects. In that, friendship would be one of those themes that would fit under that. Relationship between the couple. All of these things, what would it be for you? What would the headline be? If we were to say, this is Another Woman's Husband by Gill Paul, what's the overarching theme? What's the headline?
I don't know. I mean, friendship was a big theme that I was thinking about. Yes, absolutely. And what's, all's fair in love and war? Is it fair to steal another woman's husband in certain circumstances? I suppose I was looking at that as well.
It's delicious stuff, though.
You don't think about themes when you're writing. I think it's more for the reader.
No, it's the reporters after that ask these questions, and you just write, right, prolifically, and we ask these questions.
Yeah.
When you invest time in a book like this, and I know your partner's here tonight, but when you invest time in a book like this, that takes you away from everyday life. Tell us about, or does it? Tell us about your writing style. There are some authors that hole up in a room and nobody sees them for 6 months, and they're doing research and they're doing all these things. And then there are others who write while their family's sleeping or their partner's sleeping. What's your writing style like?
Well, I'm very, very fortunate because writing is actually my day job now. There's nothing else I can do really. I don't know what, that's all I can do. So I get to my desk at 9 o'clock. You have to do social media and bits and pieces of marketing for a while, and then just sit down and research or write and carry on. And I'll go out and swim at some point. I swim every day, and then come back and then stop at 6 o'clock and go out and do something in the evening. So it's just a job, really.
It's just right back at it. But it's a job that you love. What do your friends say? Do you go, is there anybody that you go to for advice when you're writing? There's the historical side, but there's the other stuff too. Are there people you check in with that are not the literary agents and not the copy editors and say, okay, here's what I'm thinking, this is the scenario I'm thinking of writing about, what do you think? Who are those people?
Well, actually, it's strange you should say that, because the mother of one of these people is sitting in the audience tonight.
There you go.
It's a Toronto friend called Karen Sullivan, who's got her own publishing company in London called Orenda. It's a fantastic company that she just started 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago. And she has been my #1 reader on every novel I've ever written. And I'll talk to her about the idea. And I'll always write a very detailed outline for my books. I mean, the outline is about a third of the length of the finished book, so that I know where everything's going. And she will read it at that stage, and then she will read it when I've finished. And I get pages and pages of notes back from her in an email. And it's a bit, so she always is the first person, and I'll do everything she suggests I do, because she's always right.
You found it right all the time. If there's another theme, it would be acceptance and the understanding that people are layered, right?
Yeah.
A Wallis Simpson, okay, she stole another woman's husband, okay, granted, but brilliant and witty and all of these things.
Yeah.
And it's the empathy, because I felt so much empathy, and I always do.
With Wallace?
I really did.
Right.
Yeah, a lot with
Good.
Wallace. I did. And obviously with Diana too, and I should say there's some huge connections to Toronto with Diana as well. She came here at one point, and she held the hand of an HIV patient at a time when people weren't doing that.
Yeah.
And the People's Princess sat there and held somebody that was very, very sick. And so I've always connected with that. But with Wallace, there was empathy. I felt empathy for her too. I did, in many ways. And I really think you did such a good job of showing those layers, and that people deserve love even if, they do certain things that others don't approve of. And it takes a lot of courage to move beyond that and to move beyond the acceptance of others.
She was. I think she must have been great fun as a friend.
So much fun to have dinner with and hang out with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as I was saying earlier, you didn't leave her alone with your husband, I guess. do you know, on YouTube, there's a clip. She was interviewed with the Duke in the 1960s on a TV chat show, and the host asked her, "Do you have any regrets?" And she thought for a while, and she said, "Well, I suppose there are some things one might have done differently if one had one's time again." But she said, "I had a lot of fun." And I really liked her for saying that. You know, I think she probably did. She had a horrible time round about the abdication, certainly. I mean, she was terrified. She thought she was going to be murdered in the streets, assassinated by somebody, because she really, really damaged the British Crown at the time. So.
And this is where, you know, when you think about Diana and what happened, and you talked about conspiracy theories a little earlier, this is why when you said in your country, a lot of people felt that her death, you know, there were a lot of conspiracy theories around it. There were here too. Yeah. And to this day, there are a lot of people think that, you know, something happened, something was planned, and it was time for her to go.
Yeah.
But this is what I mean about two women who challenged the crown. Yeah. Two women who said, we are who we are, and we're unapologetic, and we're living our lives in a certain way. And maybe, you know, women that we could learn a lesson or two from. In your research of them, Gill, what did they teach you most?
I don't know, just about them. They taught me not to marry into a royal family. Never.
Good lesson. Okay, yeah, good.
I suppose learning a bit about them. I was talking about looking at primary sources, and with Diana, she's always portrayed, I mean, clearly she was hugely empathetic and very glamorous, but as she said herself, she was thick as a plank. She didn't pass any formal exams at school. But I read, during my research, I read a lot of letters that she wrote to the bereaved, to people in hospital, to children. And she wrote the most beautiful letters. And as a writer, that really struck a chord with me, that she used to always write her thank you letters the same evening. When she got back from a dinner party, she wouldn't even go to bed. She would sit down and write this beautiful letter before she went to take her makeup off. No, she was just an extraordinary character. And the reason that we were all so shocked about her death, it's so completely random, and the wrong ending for her, just as she was coming into herself as a woman, finding her role, getting involved with the landmines campaign, leprosy, children with cancer. She had so much to give the world, and that's why we can't accept that this goddess died in a concrete tunnel as the result of a drink driver. It's just bizarre. It doesn't make sense, and I think that's why people came up with the conspiracy theories. But really, when you read through the inquest findings, I don't personally think any of the conspiracy theories work, I'm afraid. I don't know if any of you do. But there would have had to have been so many people in on the conspiracy, including French ambulance drivers and, you know, all sorts. It just doesn't quite add up.
Is there anything else that you've got your eye on right now that you would love to write about? We were talking, and it's so interesting earlier, because I said to Gill, have you ever been to Toronto before? And she said, the last time I was here, I was 10 years old. And I said, a lot of things have changed, Gill.
Yeah, quite a few.
And I said, did our city inspire you at all? And she said, well, not yet.
I have to...
Yeah.
I find the little sparks for a story sometimes just, you know, reading about a city. If I read a history of Toronto, I think somewhere in a footnote there might be a little story. I think, oh, I'll go down that rabbit hole and see what comes up. So quite often my novels have started out in a footnote in a non-fiction book, and I just explore them and see what happens next.
Oh my goodness. I just have to delve into the affair for a second, because I wanted to know about your research as far as Burton and Taylor went, and who you spoke to in order to construct that one, which was a huge bestseller for you, which did well for you.
Yeah,
yes.
It did.
Yes.
I was very lucky to find somebody that had worked on the set. He was an actor. He played the centurion that stands behind Richard Burton all the way through. And he sent me pages and pages. He lives in Italy now, but we talked on the phone at length. And then when I did the first draft, he corrected it. He said, oh, that's not how it works on films. They would have shot that bit and then that bit, and this would happen separately. So he completely went through all the detail for me, which I was very grateful for. And I'd thought I was quite safe writing about Taylor and Burton because they were both dead by then, and they're not. I mean, they don't feature hugely in the book. But after it was published, I got a letter from the wife of the director, Joe Mankiewicz's wife, Rosemary, who I do mention in the book because she had an affair with him on the set, which later turned into marriage. And when I saw her name in the email, I thought, oh no, is she going to be upset with me? But fortunately, she was quite happy with it. But yes, you have to watch out for libel with people quite so recent.
When people describe you, as we did earlier tonight, there's so many different monikers. Historical novelist could be one of them. Romance is another. Nonfiction, another. How do you see yourself?
I describe myself as a historical novelist. If somebody asks, I don't have a problem with that at all. It's, but, I mean, there's all sorts of different kinds of historical novel, and I'm writing mostly in the early 20th century, and I'm very lucky to be doing that. The word romance, I suppose, has some connotations of a very light kind of book, like what we call chick lit.
Yes,
the phrase
we use the phrase chick lit.
And I don't think I'm writing chick lit, even though I do tend to have some kind of love affair at the core of the book. But I don't reject that either. You know, whatever. Call me anything.
No, but this is what I like so much, because it seemed to have all of that happening. I love chick lit as well. And it felt, yes, a little bit of that. Mm-hmm. And yes, of course, the history. And yes, some other genres all rolled up into one that worked so very, very well. At the end of the day, you're welcome. No, it's really, really good, you guys. It's really good. At the end of the day, when people read Another Woman's Husband, what do you want them to take away?
I hope it's an entertaining story that gives a sense of the eras. Actually, it became easier for women, I suppose, by the 1990s. There's a kind of difference between how you lived as a woman in Wallace's era and the more freedom that you have in Diana's era. I suppose that's in there as well. Mm-hmm. But I just want to give a sense of the era. I want to tell a story that's entertaining and that keeps people reading, hopefully, and that they enjoy.
Yeah, well, it indeed is all of that. And as I said, this is my first foray, and I loved it. I loved it very, very much. And if you haven't read it, you will too. It kept me up late at night. I've got 2 kids. I was tired, and I stayed up anyway, reading it because it was really, really good. I want to ask one more question about fashion. There is the couple that is engaged in this. The young woman has a vintage store. It's a store, and there are fantastic pieces of clothing and articles and jewelry from eras gone by. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you're interested in as well? I could tell, yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. No, I have quite a few. This is not vintage, clearly, but I do have quite a few vintage dresses, and I like rooting around. And I like second-hand clothes, actually, that you get in vintage shops, and imagining the story of the person that had it before you, and sometimes you find a little something in the pocket, and an insight into what that person's life might be like. Yeah, I like clothes that have got history attached to them. Particularly love the 1930s when Wallace was around, when they, the bias-cut dresses, the tea dresses, and I don't wear quite such big jewelry as her, but I'm not averse to it by any means.